seated properly. Okay, gotta get better at finger drumming. Sorry, okay. Hey, what's up? It's Anthony here at LANDR, and in this video, I'm going to show you 5 overlooked parameters that you may have forgotten to automate. But first, what is automation? Automation is when you're changing a parameter in your DAW over time. So you can take a static parameter like volume or panning, and you can shift that to change over time. As time goes by in your song, you can automate that parameter. So you can get swells of volume, you can get panning going from left to right, a lot of different things that will add tons of interest to your mix. All right, let's get into the 5 commonly overlooked parameters that you may have forgotten to automate. And the first one is volume. I shouldn't do that. So let's get into the 5 commonly overlooked parameters that you may have forgotten to automate, with the first one being the most important, and that is volume. Automating volume is one of the most impactful ways to bring your mix to life. Subtle shifts in volume change can bring certain elements out of your mix and keep the listener engaged and interested. So the first way I've used automation in my mix is on the drums. Right before they come in, there's kind of a pickup bar here. And I lowered the volume on this pickup bar, so then when they come in at full volume, it really has a lot of impact. So let's just listen to it now within the mix. So if I open the volume automation, and you can usually find it in Ableton here, you go to Mixer and Track Volume. You can see I put a swell in here, and I'll just solo that by itself. So having that element introduced to the listener early and having the volume just a bit quieter will make it really impactful when it comes in with the whole beat. Another way to create interest with volume automation is to create swells with the volume automation. So I think this is going to work really well on this strings track here, and I'll just play it in the song so you can have an idea what it sounds like. And here it is solo. So it's pretty quiet right now. I'll bring it. So let's say I want my starting point there. I'm just going to create the dots and then have one in the middle. Then I can bring this up and just create these little swells that are really going to make this part stand out and grab the listener's ear. All right, let's see if this works well. That sounds good on its own. I'm going to try it in context of my track. And that should be over there. Just going to fix this up. I think it sounds good. Just bring it down a tiny bit. And I think I can copy and paste it now and just double check. Awesome. So I'll just copy and paste that with Control C and Control V. So it's happening every phrase. A really impactful way to use volume automation is when a new element comes in your mix, you can slightly boost the volume to catch the listener's ear, then bring it back down into the mix, and that element will stay with the listener as the song moves forward. So it's starting up here in volume and then it comes back down. So it's just kind of introducing itself, then backing off, and it really adds interest in your mix. The next parameter that you may have forgotten to automate is the filter or EQ plugin. Automating filters and EQs is a great way to add a sense of development if it's happening gradually over time, or if you have different EQ adjustments to make depending on what the track is doing in your song. One technique that I personally love using is to cut out the high end and gradually bring it in as the song is developing. And I love doing this in intros because it really makes the intro grow over time, and then when it finally kicks in, it's really, really powerful. And I did this on this arpeggio track that I have here. I'm just going to bring up the filter, so I'm selecting auto filter, which I have, and then the frequency. So the frequency is starting at 500 and it's coming all the way up to 12 here. So here it is, it's gradually growing as the intro comes in. I also did this to my piano plugin, but I used the EQ instead. I have just the low bass frequencies on my piano for the intro, and it's really giving it a distant feel. And then when the beat kicks in, I have the original EQ on my piano. So you can see it jumping from 400 Hertz all the way up. And I'll just fast forward a bit. And now we have the full sound of the piano, which is giving it a lot more impact once the beat kicks in. You can also do the opposite of this. So instead of cutting out the high end, you can cut out the low end if you want to take out some energy from a specific section. So I have here a breakdown section, and on my bass, I've automated this EQ plugin to turn on. And it's cutting out the sub bass frequencies just for my breakdown. So it's kind of mellowing out the breakdown. And then once the breakdown's finished, the EQ turns off. And I'll just play it from here. And you can see the EQ turned off there. This brings us to the next parameter you may have forgotten to automate, and that is your plugins. Automating plugins is so powerful because there are so many third-party plugins that are capable of doing so many different things, and if you can automate those and have them change over time, you can achieve a really original sound. One thing I like to do is just to automate the plugins bypass switch, so you could turn it on and off with the automation. That's what I did on my 808 track here. Plugins that work really well with this are delay and reverbs, so you can switch them on at the start or the end of the phrase, and it can kind of catch the reverb tail at the end of the phrase, which gives it more dynamics. And I've done this to my synth lead, so I'll just show you here. I have tal reverb, and then I have the device on here. So you can see it's just catching the tail end of the phrase. And then it turns off before the phrase starts again. And then I have it on for the whole breakdown part. Just to give the breakdown a bit more ambience. And then when the breakdown's done and the melody line comes in again, the EQs, the reverb is shutting off. You can also automate the parameters inside of the plugin. So I have my tal reverb here, and this line represents the dry signal. So throughout the breakdown, the dry signal slowly creeping back in, which is going to give the melody more impact once the breakdown is over. And you can see the automation controlling the knob right here. And the wet is also coming back, so it's kind of coming forward. And then I turn the plugin off at that point. So the next parameter you may have forgotten to automate is panning. Panning is such a powerful tool because you can make your mix sound really big and really wide, and it's really simple to use. It's either left or right. I really like using panning on pads to create that stereo width, so it kind of goes from left to right. And I've done that on this high pad here. So it's going right, and then it goes back to left. And it just really adds that nice stereo width. And it has its own pattern as well. I have another pad up here that I use on like a side chain pad that I have. So it's going slightly to the right and slightly to the left. It just really adds another dimension and gives your listener more interested things to listen to inside of your mix. The last parameter you may have forgotten to automate are the MIDI CC messages. Things like pitch bend, modulation, or the sustain pedal on the piano are available to automate. So in Ableton, to get there, you just go into your MIDI clip and you press the envelopes button. And then you can select the envelopes on the second dialog box here. So you can see I have pitch bend automated, that's where the circle is there, but you can also select modulation, breath, the foot pedal, the volume balance. So these are all the MIDI messages that are affecting the MIDI before it hits the plugin. I really love using the pitch bend. It can add some expression to my MIDI. And I've used it in my melody, which I think really sounds great. So it's going to fall down half. So this works just like the arrangement lanes in the automation window. You can either use the cursor, draw them in, or I could use my MIDI device to affect the MIDI CC messages. So I've shown the pitch bend automation on my lead synth, and I've also automated the modulation on my pad sound here. So I'm using the Tyrell N6, which is a free plugin, and I'll include the download link in the description below. And you can see the mod wheel moving right here. And what that's doing is affecting the rhythm of the synth in this patch specifically. And I'll just bring up the MIDI clip. So I'm going to envelopes, and then I can go to modulation. And you can see I've raised that, and then it kind of chops the rhythm a bit as it's being raised. So if I raise it, it's going to go really fast. Just subtle things like that make your mix sound much more interesting and make the listener really intrigued. Alright, so that's it. I really hope you got a lot out of this video. I'm sure you weren't overlooking a lot of these parameters. You're probably automating your volume, but maybe you know how to automate your volume in a different way now. If you like this video and it helps with your creation process, hit that bell, get notified when we release new videos, subscribe if you haven't, hit the thumbs up, and we'll continue making more content like this.